This is where you belong, you old woman. I don't have your time.
Please, you can't do this. Please, my son, don't leave me here. The cold is too much here. No, please don't leave me.
Get out of my way, you old woman. I have no time for this.
Where will I go?
That's not my problem anymore. Just leave.
Please don't go.
My son locked me in a freezing cabin in the Connecticut woods and drove away with my house, my savings, and my wedding ring still on my finger when he pulled off my hand. I want you to sit with that for a second. My own son, the boy I raised alone after his father died, the boy I worked 2 jobs for. He looked me in the eyes and he left me to freeze. My name doesn't matter yet. You'll know it by the end. What matters is what I did next. Because what I did next is the reason I'm alive to tell you this story today. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now for you. I want to see this from every corner of the world. And if stories like this move you, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Now, let's go back to where it all began. I was 61 years old. I lived in a quiet house in New Jersey, the same house where I raised my son by myself after my husband died in a car accident when the boy was only 7. I worked as a seamstress for 30 years. My hands were rough, my back was tired, but I never once complained because every stitch I sewed was for him. His name was Daniel. He had my husband's eyes and my stubbornness. Growing up, he was sweet. He used to bring me flowers from a neighbor's garden and lie about where he got them. He used to fall asleep on my lap while I sewed late into the night, the sewing machine humming like a lullaby. I loved that boy more than my own breath. When he grew older, something in him changed. Slowly at first. So slow, I told myself I was imagining it. He started caring more about money, about things, about what other people had. He would look at rich boys' cars and rich boys' shoes, and something dark would cross his face, like a shadow passing over the sun. I didn't stop him. That was my mistake. I gave him everything I could, and when I couldn't give more, I felt guilty, like I had failed him. So when he asked for money for a business idea, I said yes. When he asked to borrow for my retirement savings, I said yes. When he asked me to sign papers I didn't fully understand, I trusted him, and I said yes. That trust nearly killed me. Let me tell you about the day everything fell apart, because it started so normal, so ordinary, that I still get chills thinking about how blind I was. It was late November. The air in New Jersey had that bite to it, the kind that gets into your bones before winter even fully arrives. Daniel showed up at my door with a smile, so warm I almost forgot how distant he'd been the past few months. He said he wanted to take me somewhere special. A cabin trip, just the 2 of us, before the holidays got busy. He said we needed time together, mother and son, like the old days. My heart nearly burst with joy. I hadn't heard him talk like that in years. I packed a small bag that same night, humming to myself, thinking maybe my boy was coming back to me. Maybe the distance was just growing pains. Maybe I'd get my son back. We drove for almost 3 hours, deep into the Connecticut countryside, where the trees stood tall and bare and the roads grew narrow and lonely. Daniel talked the whole way, but looking back now, his words were empty. He talked about his plans, his future, things he wanted to do, but he never once asked about me. Not my health, not my day, not my heart. I didn't notice then. I was just happy to hear his voice. The cabin was small and wooden, sitting alone at the edge of a frozen lake, surrounded by nothing but silence and snow-dusted pines. It looked peaceful. It looked like a place you'd bring someone you loved. It was actually the perfect place to disappear. We arrived just as the sun started sinking behind the trees. Daniel carried my bag inside, lit the fireplace, and made me a cup of tea. For 1 hour, just 1 hour, I was the happiest mother alive. We talked about his childhood. We laughed about the time he broke his arm climbing our old fence. For 1 hour, I believe I had my son back. Then he asked me to sign something. He said it was paperwork for the cabin rental. Nothing serious, just a formality so we could stay the weekend without issues. He placed a folder in front of me and handed me a pen. My eyes were tired from the drive. My glasses were in my bag by the door. I trusted him. I always trusted him. So I signed where he pointed. I didn't know I was signing away power of attorney over my accounts. I didn't know I was signing away the deed to my house. I didn't know I was signing my own disappearance. After I signed, Daniel's face changed. It was like watching a mask fall off. The warmth drained out his eyes so fast it scared me. He stood up, walked to the door, and grabbed his jacket like we were leaving. I asked him what was wrong. He turned around and looked at me with an expression I will never forget as long as I live. Cold, empty, like he was looking at a stranger, not his mother. He said, "You gave me everything I needed already." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Then I saw him pick up my bag, my phone, and the small heater sitting by the fireplace, and carry them all outside to his car. I ran after him, panic rising in my throat like fire. I asked him what he was doing. He didn't answer. He just kept moving, calm, methodical, like he had planned every single second of this. Then he turned to me one last time, standing in the doorway with the freezing wind howling behind him, and he said words that shattered something inside me forever. I needed the house. I needed the money. I don't need you anymore. And then, the part that still makes my hands shake when I tell it, he reached for my hand, my left hand, the one still wearing the wedding ring his father gave me 30 years ago, the only thing I had left of the man I loved. Daniel pulled it off my finger, slow and deliberate, like he was peeling away the last piece of me that still meant something. He said the ring was worth something, and he wasn't going to leave anything behind. Then he walked out, got in his car, and drove away into the dark, leaving me alone in a freezing cabin in the middle of nowhere, with no phone, no heat, and no way to call for help. I stood in that doorway for I don't know how long, watching his taillights disappear into the black trees, the cold air burning my lungs, my mind refusing to believe what had just happened. My own son, my baby, the boy I nursed through fevers, the boy I sang to sleep, had just left me to die in the snow. If you're still with me, drop a comment right now and tell me what you have done in that moment. I want to know, because what I did next, nobody saw coming. Not even me. The fire in the fireplace was already dying, and Daniel had taken the extra wood pile from beside the door, probably to make sure I couldn't keep it burning long. The temperature outside was dropping fast, and I could feel the cold seeping to the cabin walls like it was hunting me. I want you to understand something about me before I continue. I wasn't always weak. Before I became a mother, before I became a wife, I grew up poor in a small town, the kind of poor where you learn to survive on nothing. My own mother taught me that when the world takes everything from you, you don't cry first. You think first, then you cry later when you're safe. So even with my heart breaking into pieces, even with my hands trembling from cold and shock, some part of me refused to just sit down and die in that cabin. I searched every corner of that place with what little firelight I had left. I found an old wool blanket in a closet, moth-eaten but thick. I found a box of matches Daniel had missed, tucked behind a shelf. I found half a candle, and I lit it, cupping my hands around the flame like it was the last heartbeat in the world. I wrapped myself in that blanket and sat by the dying fire, feeding it small broken pieces of an old wooden chair I dragged from the corner, praying it would be enough to survive the night. The cold in Connecticut in November doesn't play games. It gets into your bones, into your teeth, into your thoughts. I remember drifting in and out of sleep, terrified that if I closed my eyes too long, I would never open them again. But somewhere in that long, dark, freezing night, something inside me shifted. The grief turned into something else, something sharper, something colder than the air around me. I thought about every sacrifice I made, every double shift at the sewing shop, every meal I skipped so he could eat, every dream I buried so his dreams could grow. And I thought about his face, empty and cold, as he pulled my wedding ring off my finger and drove away. Somewhere around 3 a.m, shivering under that old blanket, I made a decision. If I survived this night, Daniel was going to pay for what he did, not with violence. I want to be clear about that, because revenge doesn't have to mean blood. Sometimes the deepest revenge is watching someone lose everything they thought they'd already won. Morning came slow, gray, and merciless. The fire had burned down to ash hours before. My fingers were numb, my lips cracked, but I was alive. I forced myself up and searched the cabin one more time, this time with clearer eyes. That's when I found it. An old landline phone in a drawer beneath the kitchen counter. Dusty. Forgotten. Probably left by the cabin's actual owner. My hand shook so hard I could barely dial, but I got through to a small local ranger station nearby. I told them I was stranded, freezing, and needed help immediately. Within an hour, 2 rangers arrived in a truck, wrapped me in real blankets, and got me warm air blasting in their vehicle. I cried the moment the heat hit my skin, not from relief, but from rage that had been frozen inside me all night, finally starting to thaw. They asked what happened. I told them everything. The rangers exchanged a look I'll never forget, a look of disbelief and disgust, and one of them said quietly, "Ma'am, your son could have killed you." That sentence hit me harder than the cold ever did. They took me to a small clinic nearby where a doctor checked me for hypothermia and frostbite. My fingers were damaged but savable. My body was weak but alive, and in that hospital bed, wrapped in warm blankets. Staring at the ceiling, I stopped grieving the son I lost and started planning the mother I was about to become. Here's where I need you to lean in close, because this is where the story turns. I didn't have my phone. I did have access to my bank account, because Daniel had already moved money the moment he had my signature. I didn't even have a house to go back to, because that paper I signed transferred ownership straight into his name. But here's what Daniel didn't know. He didn't know that years ago, terrified by whispers I'd heard about his growing debts and shady friends, I had quietly opened a second account under my maiden name, a small emergency fund, hidden even from him. Funded slowly over years from side, sewing jobs I never told anyone about. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive, and more importantly, enough to fight back. He also didn't know that my late husband's old business partner, a man named Robert who had remained a loyal friend to our family for decades, was still alive and still sharp as a blade, working as a retired financial attorney in New York City. The moment I was released from that clinic, wrapped in a coat the Rangers gave me, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and a fire in my chest that no cold could ever touch again, I made one phone call. I called Robert. If you're feeling the tension building right now, comment below with just one word, the word cold. I want to see how many of you felt that freezing night with me. And if you haven't already, subscribe now, because the next part of this story is where everything changes. Robert answered on the second ring. The moment I told him what happened, his voice went from warm to steel in seconds. He told me to come straight to his office in the city, no arguments. He said the words that gave me strength when I had none left. He said, "We're going to take back everything that boy stole from you, and he's going to learn exactly who raised him." The train ride into New York City felt like moving through a dream. I stared out the window at the gray skyline rising in the distance, feeling like a ghost wearing my own skin. Just 24 hours earlier, I had been sipping tea with my son, believing in miracles. Now I was riding into the city to destroy the empire he built on my broken back. Robert's office was small but sharp, lined with law books and framed photos of cases won over decades. He hugged me the moment I walked in, and for the first time since that cabin door slammed shut, I let myself cry. Not from weakness, from release. He sat me down, made me tea, and asked me to tell him everything, every detail, every paper I signed, every word Daniel said. I gave him all of it, and as I spoke, I watched his face harden with a controlled fury I hadn't seen since my husband's funeral, when Robert stood beside the casket and swore to always look out for our family. Robert explained something to me that changed everything. Because I signed those papers under emotional distress, without my glasses, without full understanding of the documents, and under circumstances that could be proven coercive, especially with hospital records confirming hypothermia and the Ranger report confirming abandonment, we had a real, powerful legal case. He said the words I needed to hear most. Daniel didn't just steal from you. He broke the law. And now we're going to prove it. Robert filed emergency legal motions within days, freezing any transactions Daniel attempted on the house or the funds. He contacted the local sheriff's department, filed a police report for elder abandonment and fraud, both serious charges. He gathered the Ranger statement, the hospital records, and started building a case so tight Daniel wouldn't be able to breathe without it tightening around him. But we needed more. We needed proof of intent. We needed to show this wasn't a misunderstanding, but a calculated plan. That's when I remembered something. A small detail that seemed meaningless in that freezing cabin, but now felt like the missing piece of the puzzle. Daniel, in his rush to leave, in his cold confidence that I would either freeze or be too broken to fight back, had left something behind. His old laptop bag, tucked under the couch, forgotten in his hurry to grab the essentials. I hadn't touched it in the cabin because my mind was consumed with survival. But the Rangers had collected all items from the cabin as part of the abandonment investigation, including that bag. Inside it, Robert's investigator found something devastating. Text messages, saved in draft form because Daniel apparently forgot to delete them, messages between him and a friend, discussing the exact plan, taking me to a remote cabin, getting my signature under the pretense of paperwork, leaving me there, selling the house fast before I could recover legally, splitting the money with a shady associate, helping him fake new ownership documents. It was all there, written in his own words, in his own phone, saved by his own carelessness. I remember sitting in Robert's office, reading those messages with my own eyes, feeling the last thread of hope that maybe, somehow, Daniel still loved me somewhere deep inside. Finally snap. He hadn't just abandoned me in a moment of anger or greed. He had planned my death in the cold like it was a business transaction. If you're angry right now, I want you to comment the word justice below, because that's exactly what I was hungry for in that moment. Robert took those messages straight to the district attorney's office. Combined with the Rangers' report, the hospital records, and the forged documents Daniel was already trying to push through, the case became undeniable. Within 2 weeks, an arrest warrant was issued for Daniel on charges of elder fraud, abandonment endangering a vulnerable adult, and attempted grand larceny. But Daniel, thinking he was smarter than everyone, wasn't even in New Jersey anymore. He had already flown to Los Angeles, California, believing distance meant safety. He believed that 3,000 miles between him and his cold, freezing, powerless mother meant he had gotten away with everything. He had no idea I wasn't cold and powerless anymore. I was awake. I was furious. And for the first time in my life, I had nothing left to lose, which made me the most dangerous version of myself I had ever been. Robert worked with local authorities in Los Angeles, and within days, they located Daniel living in a rented apartment, already spending stolen money on new clothes, a new car lease, and expensive dinners, celebrating his supposed victory over the mother who raised him alone. The day they arrested him, Robert called me personally. He said Daniel was caught completely off guard, standing in a valet line outside a Los Angeles restaurant, laughing with friends, when 2 officers approached him and placed him in handcuffs right there on the sidewalk. Robert told me one more detail that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said that when the officers told Daniel he was being charged with abandoning and defrauding his elderly mother, Daniel's face went pale. And he said one sentence that revealed everything about who he had become. He said, "She was going to die eventually anyway." Those words didn't break me the way they might have broken someone else. Instead, they set something free inside me. Because in that one sentence, my son confirmed everything I needed to know. He didn't see me as his mother anymore. He saw me as an obstacle, an expiration date, something to be removed for profit. And that meant I no longer had to grieve the loss of a loving son, because that son had been gone long before that cabin. What I lost that night wasn't love. It was an illusion. The trial took almost 7 months. 7 long months of court dates, evidence hearings, and Daniel's lawyers trying every trick to paint me as confused, forgetful, an unreliable elderly woman making up stories out of spite. But the evidence was too strong. The messages were too clear. The Ranger's testimony was too solid. And when I took to stand myself, wrapped in a modest gray dress, my damaged fingers still slightly numb from frostbite scarring, I told the court every single detail that night. From the warmth of his fake smile to the cold of his real intentions. I told them about the wedding ring. I held up my bare finger, the one that had worn that ring for 30 years, and I told the courtroom exactly how my son pulled it off my hand before driving away into the dark. There wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. Even some jurors wiped their faces. But Daniel, sitting at that defense table in his cheap suit bought with money that wasn't his, never once looked at me. Not once during my entire testimony did he raise his eyes to meet mine. That told me everything I needed to know about the shame buried somewhere deep inside him. Shame he refused to show, but shame that was there nonetheless. The jury returned their verdict on a cold morning in early June, almost exactly 7 months after that freezing night in the cabin. Guilty on all charges. Elder fraud, abandonment endangering a vulnerable adult, attempted grand larceny, falsifying legal documents. The judge sentenced Daniel to 12 years in state prison, with the possibility of reduced time only after serving a mandatory minimum of 8 years. 12 years. My son, the boy who once fell asleep on my lap listening to my sewing machine hum, was going to spend the next 12 years of his life behind bars, because he decided his own mother's life was worth less than a house and a bank account. If you made it this far, I need you to know something. This story isn't about hate. It's about what happens when love is betrayed so deeply that the only way to survive is to become someone stronger than the pain trying to kill you. Comment the word strength below if you're still with me, because we're almost at the part that changes everything. With the house legally returned to my name through the court's ruling, and the stolen funds recovered through Robert's relentless legal work, I finally had something I hadn't had in months. Stability. But stability wasn't enough for me anymore. Something inside me had changed permanently in that freezing cabin, and I knew I couldn't just go back to my old quiet life like nothing happened. I sold the house in New Jersey. Too many memories lived in those walls, both sweet and poison, and I needed distance from all of it. With Robert's guidance, I invested the recovered funds carefully, and for the first time in my 61 years of life, I did something entirely for myself. I moved to Florida, near the coast, where the winters are gentle and the air never bites the way Connecticut air had bit me that November night. I bought a small house near the water, nothing extravagant, but warm, bright, and completely mine. But here's the twist that even I didn't see coming, the one that changed the entire meaning of my story. While going through old boxes during the move, boxes I hadn't opened in years, I found my old sewing patterns, sketches I made decades ago as a young woman with dreams bigger than my circumstances allowed. Dreams I buried the day I became a mother and decided every dollar, every hour, every dream would belong to my son instead of me. Something about surviving that freezing night, about fighting back instead of dying quietly, about watching my son face consequences for the first time in his life, woke up a part of me that had been asleep for 30 years. I decided to open a small sewing and design studio in Florida, teaching young women in the community the skills I'd spent my whole life mastering, but never had the courage to build into something of my own. I called it Second Stitch, a name that meant everything to me, a second chance, a new beginning stitched together from the broken pieces of my old life. Within a year, that small studio grew into something I never imagined. Local news picked up my story, not the painful details of Daniel's betrayal, but the story of resilience, an older woman rebuilding her life from nothing, teaching a new generation of women the value of independence and skill. Women came from all over, some just curious, some struggling financially, some simply looking for community. I taught them not just how to sew, but how to build something of their own that no one can ever take from them. I taught them what I learned the hardest way possible. Never build your entire identity around someone else's love, because people can change, and when they do, you need to have something solid left standing on your own. My studio became known throughout the local community, not just for the beautiful dresses and alterations we created, but for the strength radiating from every woman who walked through those doors. We weren't just making clothes. We were rebuilding lives, one stitch at a time. About a year and a half after the trial, I received a letter. It was from Daniel, sent from the state prison where he was serving his sentence. My hand shook as I opened it, old wounds threatening to reopen despite everything I had built since that night. Inside, his handwriting was shaky, nothing like the confident scrawl I remember from his youth. He wrote that he was sorry. He wrote that prison had given him time to think, time to understand what he'd done, time to realize that greed had blinded him to the only person who never stopped loving him unconditionally. He asked if I could ever forgive him. He asked if someday, when he was released, we could rebuild something between us. I sat with that letter for 3 days before I responded. I thought about the boy who used to bring me stolen flowers from the neighbor's garden. I thought about the man who left me to freeze in a cabin. calm and cold as ice, telling me I would die eventually anyway. I wrote him back one letter, and one letter only. I told him that forgiveness was something I could offer, because carrying hatred forever would only freeze my own heart the way he tried to freeze my body. But I told him something else too, something I needed him to understand clearly. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It did not mean opening my door to him again. It did not mean returning to the same trust he shattered so easily. I told him I forgave him for my own peace, not for his comfort. And I told him that whatever relationship we might have in the future, if any, would need to be built slowly, honestly, and only after real, proven change, not just words written from a prison cell out of desperation. I never responded to another letter after that, not out of cruelty, but out of self-protection. Some doors, once closed by betrayal, don't need to be locked forever, but they also don't need to be flung wide open just because time has passed. If you're feeling something right now, comment the word forgiveness below, because that's exactly the lesson this story carries at its core. Today, as I sit here telling you this story, my studio in Florida employs 11 women, all building skills, confidence, and independence they never had before. My hands, once frozen and damaged in a Connecticut cabin, now move gracefully over fabric every single day, creating something beautiful from what once felt like the end of everything. I never remarried. I never needed to. I found something more powerful than romantic love in that freezing cabin. I found the unbreakable love I had for myself. The love that refused to die quietly in the cold. The love that turned betrayal into purpose and pain into power. Daniel is still serving his sentence. He has 4 more years before possible release. I don't know what kind of man he'll be when he walks out. I don't know if the letters he wrote were genuine remorse or simply the words of a desperate man seeking comfort. What I do know is this. Whatever happens next in his life is his responsibility now, not mine. I spent 61 years believing my worth was measured by how much I sacrificed for someone else. It took a freezing cabin, a stolen wedding ring, and a son's cold betrayal to finally teach me that my worth was never something anyone else could take, sell, or leave behind in the dark. I survived that night, not because I was lucky, but because somewhere deep inside me, buried under decades of quiet sacrifice, there was a woman who refused to disappear quietly. And once I found her again, nothing, not even my own son, could ever make me small enough to freeze in silence again. This is my story. This is how betrayal almost destroyed me, and how I turned that same betrayal into the foundation of the strongest, freest version of myself I have ever been. Before you go, I want to leave you with 10 lessons this story taught me. Lessons I hope you carry with you long after this video ends. Number 1, love someone with your whole heart, but never build your entire identity around them, because people can change in ways you never expect. Number 2, trust is a gift, not an obligation, and it should always be earned continuously, not given blindly forever. Number 3, silence in the face of mistreatment does not protect you. It only delays the moment you finally have to fight for yourself. Number 4, real strength is not the absence of fear. It is making a decision to survive even when every part of you feels frozen and broken. Number 5, betrayal from someone you love the most will always hurt the deepest, but it does not define your worth or your future. Number 6, forgiveness is something you offer for your own peace, not something you owe to someone simply because time has passed. Number 7, it is never too late to rediscover the dreams you buried for someone else, no matter how many years have gone by. Number 8, justice matters, and standing up for yourself legally and emotionally is not revenge. It is self-respect in action. Number 9, the people who truly love you will never make you feel disposable, expendable, or like an obstacle in their way. Number 10, your second chapter can be more powerful than your first if you have the courage to pick up the pieces and build something new from the ashes of what broke you. If this story touched you the way it touched me while living it, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that survival and reinvention are always possible, no matter how cold the night feels. Tell me in the comments below, what would you have done if you were left in that cabin? Would you have forgiven your son, or would you have walked away forever? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your heart on this. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Stories like this one are why this channel exists, to remind you that no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how cold the night, there's always a way to find your fire again. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, and never let anyone convince you that your life is worth less than what they can take from you.